Several things, initial impressions struck me, one of which is the extraordinary consistency and homogeneity of it. So you feel very much the kind of symbiosis or the coming together of these three Abrahamic faiths in this architecture. And yet at the same time it's also very rich and very simple, outwardly simple, no doubt complex to execute detail, which underlines the differences. And those aren't differences as sort of setting apart. Somehow the architecture manages to make it differences that in some ways reinforce the shared origin that those three faiths have.
We worked originally on Masdar City and was really looking at Mashrabiyah, small streets, the walkability, the 15-minute city. And that then, on all the projects I've kind of worked since 2011, this kind of understanding of culture and the small, little environmental tweaks that we need to make to our design.
I believe that the future of architecture in the UAE, in a way, is producing a stronger connection to the past. Meaning that with all this contemporary architecture that we see out there, there is a longing for identity and local heritage and culture. And it's really drawing us back to look at the works that we have seen in the 60s and 70s, which actually looked at how to merge modernism with local heritage and local culture.
The future of British architecture in the UAE, I think, is an interesting question. I mean, hopefully the British architects have come into town with a humble state of mind, because at the end of the day it's a privilege to be able to work here. The fact that we had this long connection with the region, throughout the war, etc., gave us a bit of a head start, and people trusted the British, which was great. But I think that humility has to remain, and that we can't come in and say, oh, this is what you should do and this is what you have to do. We've got a lot to learn from the various traditions here, the traditions of, decorative architecture, the traditions of, the planning, town and urban planning concepts. Many aspects of what was happening here for generations can teach us a thing or two as well.
There's so much potential that has been already explored in looking into the language of vernacular architecture and see how has it implemented or reflected on today's language. So you have a lot of buildings that are very much inspired by those buildings, not in a sense of looking at its ornamentation or aesthetic value, but more on its language that focuses on sustainability, on how can we use material in the best way. And thinking about those global challenges that we see when it comes to climate change and others, and how we can really look at the vernacular architecture, to some extent also the living heritage of many places in the UAE, especially in the Northern Emirates, and how that could be seen as a potential way of living forward, but also to see how that can reflect on the language today.
Well, my first project in Abu Dhabi was Qasr Al Hosn, which is Abu Dhabi's oldest and most significant heritage structure. So that really is a full kind of encapsulant of the heritage of the UAE, starting from Abu Dhabi's oldest structure, which is a watchtower that was first noticed and recorded in oral testimony in 1760, that then turned into an impenetrable fort, and then afterwards, in the 19th century, by 1945, it was enveloped by the ruler's palace. So understanding the people, the place, the climate, the culture, the materiality is all a part of that particular project. So yes, it really is the embodiment of the culture of Abu Dhabi. To conserve, restore, reinstate and reuse the building, a team of experts, some here today, from the UAE and from around the globe, were gathered to undertake international best practice methods of conservation. Artisans and craftsmen had to be carefully sourced and in some instances trained from scratch to enable the specialised traditions of working with materials such as date palm weaving, coral stone laying, timber carvings to be undertaken in an authentic and sympathetic manner. This process not only preserved the building but also safeguarded the intangible heritage of traditional Emirati craftsmanship. Before any works were undertaken to the building, they were assessed through drawings.
The first phase of the recently opened, beautifully architected contemporary art spaces for Sharjah Arts Foundation and its Sharjah Biennial, designed by Mona Al-Musfi and Gaj Architects. This offers a series of contemporary pavilions tracing the footprints of the traditional houses in the area in a contemporary language entirely sympathetic to historic context. I think they set a real model for how you deal with new architecture in sensitive heritage areas. Here we see then contemporary architecture inserted into fragile historic fabric in a completely harmonious and seamless blend.
I'm involved in currently actually a project that the project brief was, how do you capture an Emirati sense of place? We've always been a place that's open to experimentation, and I think that we are at a place right now where there's a sort of a yearning for the past and a general interest in learning from the past and bringing sort of this indigenous wisdom into the future.
Zaha Hadid architects have been committed to the UAE for almost 3 decades, developing many of our most ambitious designs for visionary clients and communities across the country. Inspired by the sand dunes of the surrounding desert landscape, our recently completed BIA headquarters has been designed as a sequence of intersecting dunes. Powered by its solar array and equipped with next-generation technologies, the new headquarters achieves net zero energy consumption and serves as a blueprint for tomorrow's smart, sustainable cities.
Get to know people, get to understand the culture and the traditions, and to design with the context and the locality in mind, as well as the climate. It's not just come, arrive and do what you've done before, what you've done elsewhere in the world. Make it contextually appropriate and climatically responsive as a designer. Listen to what you hear and see what you've seen from the past and apply that to the future.